Well, I'm recording this video kind of late at my house. I haven't done a late night video in a while, but there's something on my heart tonight that I want to just share and put out on this video before I go to bed tonight that I hope will be a blessing to somebody. I have been reading lately in my Bible in the book of Ezra. It's a short book in the Old Testament, only has 10 chapters to it, and the background of the book of Ezra is this. I'll give you the cliff notes of it. After many years of disobedience, the children of Israel had been taken to Babylonian captivity because of their disobedience to God. And they were there for 70 years. But at the end of those years, as God had promised through the prophet Jeremiah, God began to bring his people back to Jerusalem and gave them the assignment to rebuild the temple and the city there in Jerusalem that had been destroyed 70 years earlier by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. And so, in the first few chapters of Ezra, we read that about 50,000 Jewish people left Babylon and they came back to Jerusalem and they began the process of rebuilding the temple. Well, interestingly enough, after they had just barely started working on the temple, there were people who were living in Jerusalem who were very much opposed to what these Jewish people were doing. And they didn't want to see the temple be rebuilt. They didn't believe in God. And they were not loyal to God, and they were not loyal to the people of God. And so they did everything that they could do to stop this work. Well, in Ezra chapter 3, I read this verse today, and in verse number 3, it's like this line just jumped off the pages at me. It says, though fear had come upon them because of the people of those countries, they set the altar on its bases, and they offered burnt offerings on it to the Lord, both the morning and the evening burnt offerings. And so when the Jewish people began to rebuild the temple, again, they were being threatened and intimidated and opposed by many others who were living in Jerusalem at this time. And it naturally made the Jewish people afraid. And the phrase that jumped out to me earlier today was this phrase, though fear had come upon them. And so these people loved God and they trusted God with all their heart. And yet, just like us, they were human. And when they started having these problems, they were afraid. Notice the phrase, though fear had come upon them. And yet the interesting thing is, even though this fear had come upon them, they continued to move forward by faith and they continued to do what God had called them to do. Now, I'm reading out of my favorite study Bible, and this is a new Bible I got not long ago. It's actually the Charles Stanley Life Principles Bible. And the thing I like about this Bible is that all the footnotes are life application and little lessons that we can learn. And I want to just read the sentence or so that he included to explain this verse about the fear that had come upon them. Here's what he said. To do what God asked us to do, despite our fear, is to walk in faith. Disappointments are inevitable. Discouragement and shrinking back in fear is a choice. And so I just felt led to record this video tonight. I'm not sure exactly which day that it will play. It'll be a few days from when I record it. But I'm just believing on the day that this video plays, that somebody needs to hear what I'm saying tonight, and more importantly, what God is saying tonight, because you may be like these Jewish people, and you may say, you know what, John? Fear has come upon me. Maybe it's fear of this virus, or maybe it's fear of something else in your life, or maybe you've gotten a bad diagnosis from the doctor. Maybe somebody in your family has gotten sick, or maybe there's a financial situation that's causing you to be very much afraid. Something is happening. I'm almost confident. In fact, I am confident, I'm almost certain that somebody listening to this video, whenever it is played, is going to say, John, that was for me because fear has come upon me. And fear is just paralyzing me, making it very difficult for me to move forward. What am I supposed to do? I'll tell you what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to trust God and move forward by faith. And that's what Dr. Stanley says in this footnote. To do what God asks us to do, despite our fear, is to walk in faith. As you know, I'm a big sports fan, and I always have been. And Many years ago, I had the privilege of meeting one of my favorite NFL players of all time, Michael Irvin. And he played for many years with the Dallas Cowboys, won 3 Super Bowls, went to the Hall of Fame, had a wonderful career. And I had about maybe 10 or 15 minutes to visit with him. And as we were visiting, I said to him, now I'd never met him. He doesn't know me from Adam, from anybody. But I certainly knew all about him. And I said to him, Michael, I heard you say one time that as a wide receiver, that when they would call a play in the huddle for you to run across the middle, that you got scared, that you were afraid. And I said, when I heard you say that, I really couldn't believe it, because this is a guy, if you followed football back in the day, he had much bravado and he was just very confident, and you wouldn't think he would be scared about anything. And I said, is it true? Did you really get scared when they called for you to run across the middle? And his eyes got big. And he said, let me tell you something. That is true. What I said was true. He said, you've got to understand, when you're in the NFL, or this would be true in college or even high school, but especially NFL, everybody's so big and strong. He said, when the quarterback in the huddle calls a play for you to run across the middle, you have to have your eyes on the quarterback and the ball in order to catch the ball. And he said, when you take your eyes, when you put your eyes on the quarterback and on the football, your eyes are off the defenders who are going to come and try to knock your head off. And back then, players were allowed to hit each other in the head, and football is still a very violent game, but it was much more violent before they kind of cleaned up the rules, and those were good changes that they made. He said, man, when I took my eyes off the defenders, those cornerbacks and safeties and linebackers who I knew were coming to kill me to catch that football, he said, man, the thought of that scared me to death. He said, but here's what I learned. He said, I learned that faith is not the absence of fear, but that faith is doing what you're supposed to do, even when you're afraid. Now, that's an athletic illustration of what I'm sharing with you tonight out of Ezra chapter 3. The Jewish people were afraid to do what God had told them to do. They were afraid to build that temple. And the verse says that even though fear had come upon them, they refused to allow that fear to stop them. They kept moving forward by faith. And I suppose we've all had times in our lives where we were afraid. I have. But I've learned this, that faith is not the absence of fear. Faith is facing our fears and saying, you know what? I may be afraid. I may be very nervous. I may even be scared. But what I'm going to do with God's help is I'm going to move forward, and to the best of my ability, I'm going to do what God has called me to do. And so today, if the shoe fits, wear it. If that applies to you, I'm just believing with all my heart that God put this on my heart at this late hour at my house so that it would play on just the right day, and that you could be reminded that faith is not the absence of fear. Faith is moving forward even when we're afraid. And one thing I've learned, if we'll move forward by faith and keep our eyes on Jesus and trust Him with all of our heart, eventually those fears that we have will lose their hold on us, and eventually they'll go away. So have a great day. I hope that helps. I look forward to being with you next time. Bye-bye.